at least let's not attack those people directly. It doesn't make any sense. Let's just try to bring the best information forward according to us, and then probably people hopefully at least will follow us and hopefully get a bit more nuanced view and more detailed view as well. Probably is not that important as initially thought to consume your fast digesting whey protein right after exercise, right? It's probably not so important if your total protein intake is sufficient. If you do a workout and then you give 0, 5, 10, 20 or 40 grams of protein, so also a dose response, you see also a plateauing effect from 20 to 40. So it also, after workout, it doesn't really matter if you take high quality protein such as whey to really go higher than 25 grams of protein. It doesn't affect you. The nutritional requirements and mostly the fuel of an elite/advanced athlete that is doing 4, 5, 6 sessions a week is completely different than someone who is sedentary 80% of the society nowadays and is not doing any exercise. If you go to failure or almost like near failure with light loads, you will achieve very similar hypertrophy than doing it with heavier loads, for example, 80%.
All right, Gommaar, we're live on the podcast. How you doing?
Good, thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to have you on. I've been following your guys' account on Instagram for a while now. So you run WOD Science with a colleague of yours, is that right?
Yes, that's correct, with Henning Langer. Yes.
Fantastic. So unfortunately, Henning couldn't be with us today, but I was able to snag you for a little while. So maybe for those who don't know you, start by introducing yourself, and then you talk about WOD Science and what you guys do on the page.
Yes, so I'm Gommaar. I am a muscle biologist and a sports scientist by training. I studied exercise sciences and biology at KU Leuven in Belgium back in the day. Then I started a PhD mostly related to exercise physiology in the beginning, but then I moved toward molecular biology and the effects, let's say, of nutrients on muscle growth at the end of my PhD and during my postdoc, which I started now 6 years ago in Zurich. So I've been in Zurich for 5.5 years. Where I'm studying, like at least the last 5 years, I'm studying the interaction between nutrients and exercise on muscle growth, both in humans, in rodents, but also in cells. So very molecular looking. Recently we started up a project. Maybe we can talk about that related to upcycling food sources to high quality nutrients and protein sources. So isolates, I think it could also be interesting to talk about. And then, on the side, I always was interested in explaining sports sciences to the general public. So we started now 4 years ago, WOD Science together with Henning. The page, probably you know it, where we try to explain in layman terms the newest science related to fitness, CrossFit, sports. So that's kind of where I'm interested in.
It's really great because you have that all that great background, that education, and you're also, like you said, interested in what's just coming out now, because I think that's probably one of the biggest gap that exists is between the research and then what's actually applied and done in the field. So the more channels we can have that link those two, I think is fantastic, because it's going to make everybody move forward in the sense of coaches getting access to the latest information to do the right thing, but also feedback from the field back to the researchers to update their methods and maybe what they need to look at next. So I think that back and forth is very interesting. What drove you guys to start WOD Science?
To be honest, frustration, exactly what you just explained. Like, we were sitting in our labs doing, I think, very interesting studies, but no one really got to know them. Maybe some coaches, some geeky coaches, but no one really understood much what we are doing. And there was a lot of myths and wrong misinformation, I think, about certain topics, about protein, about fitness and health in general. And we're like, okay, we have some quite clear-cut data here, and still these people write these crazy articles. Let's not attack those people directly. It doesn't make any sense. Let's just try to bring the best information forward according to us, and then probably people hopefully at least will follow us and hopefully get a bit more nuanced view and more detailed view as well. And that's kind of our drive. It was completely, let's say, unbiased, independent. We at this moment still don't really make any money with it. It's just kind of out of interest and drive to share our knowledge and the knowledge that is generated. So yeah, that's how it is. Maybe just to elaborate on that, the problem in academia, I think, at least also Henning thinks about that similar way, is that there's not really an incentive to do what we do, right? The incentive is to publish academic papers, to go to conferences, to explain your results to other peers, but really to explain it to other lay people that could be interested in what you're actually doing. There's literally, in my opinion, zero incentive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's also was one of our frustrations. We wanted to, at least in some way, counteract that one.
How did you choose the name? Were you guys both involved in CrossFit at the time, or did you get involved in the process?
Yeah, we were both CrossFitters. I'm just a decent advanced athlete. I'm okay. But Henning was actually good. Like, he was competing. He was doing some high level competitions. So yeah, I don't know, the name just came WOD from workout of the day, and then science to try to make it a little bit evidence-based, right? Yeah, that's how we saw it.
How has the page evolved since its inception? Did you guys see the kind of maybe the comments and the DMs and all of this? Do you feel like it's going in the right direction in terms of opening that line of communication and making that information available?
I guess so, yeah. I mean, in the beginning, we just, as I said, we just wanted to put it out there, and we were even not really sure what the best platform would be. Actually, Instagram, where we now usually do most of the posts, was kind of down our list. We thought, I was never really a fan of Instagram. I was like, yeah, this is not going to work. But some friend told me, yeah, you should try to do Instagram. It's very visual and so on. And this took off like crazy. Like, really, we without any promotion or whatsoever, we're now more than 70,000 followers. And we literally, did not have the same, for example, on Facebook and so on. So yeah, that was kind of the story behind it.
Okay. Is there any recent posts that stick to your mind that you really enjoyed writing? Or maybe let me take that back and backpedal a little bit to give some context. How do you guys craft your posts? Do you work together on them? Does each one pick a topic and do their own posts? How do you go about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We sometimes, when it's a sensitive topic, where we try to explain the science behind some kind of supplement that has been promoted by some athlete or something, then we go back and forth with the slides. Then we say, okay, should we say this? Should we say that? But in 95% of the times, we just find the paper, we think it's interesting, we trust each other, and we just put it online independently. Mm-hmm. So that's how it goes. So that's how we craft the post. Usually it's because I found an interesting paper that I was reading about for my job or just for interest. That's usually how it goes. Or sometimes actually there is a follower that asks, like, could you do a post about that? We actually get quite a lot of requests, and then sometimes it's actually very interesting, and then we go from there.
Interesting. What is your process when you're reading a research paper? What is your process to extract the most important and meaningful information and then distill it into those posts?
Yeah, abstract. So the first short text, I read the title abstract, and then I usually go to the methods section to understand a little bit how they did it, and if it's actually worthwhile to post it, if it's good research, or is it really like observational nonsense that we can't really say much about. And then I usually go to the results section and the discussion section. The introduction, usually I don't entirely read. That's how it goes usually.
What in the methods section for those who might, be interested in reading more research and just doing a better job at reading research, because it's not necessarily easy to do so. When you go to the methods, what are the telltale signs of, oh, this is probably, done well or done as well as it could have been, or maybe this is, like I said, not worth even looking into any further? How do you differentiate between a good research paper and a less good research paper?
Yeah, it really depends on the topic and how difficult a certain topic is to investigate, of course. But I would say the amount of people that are investigated, so are studied, the N number, the amount of subjects, it's important, but really depends on the setup of the study. For example, if you have an observational study where they don't really do an intervention, they just observe people and see what happens, then you probably need a large amount of people, more than, for example, 8 or 10, right? But when you have a randomized controlled trial where everyone is their own control, meaning you give, just a quick example, there's one group that does a certain training regimen for 6 weeks. So that's already quite difficult to do, right? In a lab, 6 weeks. And then you have a washout period where the person doesn't do anything. And then another training regimen, for example, another strength session, also 6 weeks. Then you just can't expect from the authors to include 30 subjects or 50 subjects, maybe 30, but not 50, right? It's almost impossible to do this from a financial point of view and so on. So it really depends on the setup of the study. When it's a randomized controlled trial, you probably have a lower subject, and that's acceptable. Because we get this question a lot on our comment sections, like, yeah, it's only an N of 8, it's useless. But then you have to see these people or the authors did muscle biopsies, they did a 6-month training study. I mean, I can tell you, please come and join our lab. It's going to be very difficult to do such studies. So understand that it's not the highest number, right? So that's one. So the study setup, is there a control group? That's very important. Like if there's no control group or not that well, at least designed, or no placebo group, then it's usually a red flag. Although you see that less and less, I have to say, because you just can't get that published anymore, right? And then the testing, how, for example, when it's related to, it's a little bit more specific, like how did they measure the muscle mass or the fat mass, which techniques did they use, right? So that's a little bit more technical, but those are 3 important things I look at least.
What are some of the recent posts that you've created that you thought were going to do great and then didn't? And then the opposite, some that you posted not thinking twice, and then they exploded without you thinking that they would?
Oh, yeah. It's of course quite difficult because we don't really think in advance, like, oh, this is going to do super well, right? Like after a couple of years, we kind of know, for example, when it's related to the CrossFit Open, some physiology behind the workout, or what we think is important to do well in a workout of the CrossFit Open, then we know it's going to do well. Like, and it's also, that's where people search their interest. When it's more a detailed paper about one specific topic, like genes and the effects on muscle mass, or just I posted something on the Ramadan, the fasting period, and how it affects muscle mass. So more sciencey without a clear, like, okay, this is what you have to do. Those do less well. But we don't really care because it's still important to bring that out, and at least some people will definitely take a lot of value out of that. So that's would be my answer, I guess.
I assume you follow quite closely what's going on in the CrossFit competitive world, given the posts that you put out. Do you see anything that stands out for you in this year's programming compared to previous years? Is anything drastically different from your perspective, or maybe not?
So one of course important thing is that Dave Castro, the legendary figure who always programming all the different workouts, is now not with CrossFit anymore. So if this affects the programming going forward, I don't know. It's going to be difficult to exactly know, of course. I found the open workouts very straightforward, and certainly the first two were in the same ballpark. I mean, meaning that they were similar length, very non-technical, and you would probably see the same scores from the same people going forward. The third one was, of course, a bit more advanced, and there you saw more separation. Does it really matter? Probably not, because it's still the top 10% that move forward to the quarterfinals that have been that has been just been finished, and those were much more advanced workouts. So that's exactly what CrossFit wants, right? So that's what you see. You see some pretty non-technical workouts in the open to get as many people in, which I understand, and then you see, okay, the other total with overhead squats, heavy weights, rope climbs, and so on, right? So that's I think a good idea, a good strategy, a good change from before, and I hope they will continue doing this moving forward.
Yeah, essentially making each stage more difficult from every standpoint. Like you said, there's the weight, there's the complexity of the movements that are required, yes. And that's going to keep evolving all the way into the games.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's how it should be.
That's, as you said, that's how it should be. I agree with you there. If we switch to a topic that you're well versed in, the topic of protein. If we talk, let's start to talk about quality. I think that's one topic that has become more popular in recent years. So when people talk about the quality of protein that you might want to ingest to just give your body the best building blocks in order to repair and also build, what do we need to think about when we think about protein quality, in your opinion?
So you talk about building blocks and actually related to that. So where you have to look at is simply said the amount of leucine, which is one specific amino acid that you ingest in one go. Meaning, if you take, for example, a whey protein shake, which is considered to be the highest quality. Highest quality means it has a high amount of essential amino acids, and it has also a fast digestion time. So it enters the amino acids, or the building blocks enter the bloodstream after 15 minutes after ingestion, right? So there are two components that you have to look at for protein quality. And then you need to see that you have around 2.5 grams of leucine per dose of protein after or before or whatever a workout. So 2.5 grams. So if you think about whey, it contains around 10% of leucine. And 10% of leucine, of course, if you take 25 grams of total protein, this would be accounting to 2.5 grams. So that's just one thing you could think about, because why is it important? For whey, it's easy, right? You just take 25 grams and you're good. But some people that don't want to take whey and they're more plant-based, you probably have to go a bit higher in total amount of protein. For example, if you have a lower quality, for example, pea, which is still pretty high, or soy protein, which are plant-based protein sources, of course, you probably have to go a little bit higher to get to those 2.5 grams of protein, because it contains 8 to 9% or 7 to 9% of leucine. You see, instead of the 10% related to whey. So that's a simple way of looking at it, and to see if you as a vegan, for example, ingest enough protein after a workout or related to workouts.
Interesting. Is the leucine related in any way to the body's ability to absorb the protein that is contained inside the foods, or is that a different mechanism or different altogether?
No, it's a different mechanism. So leucine is a very interesting amino acid. I've been studying this one actually for multiple years now, and leucine is, you can call it the trigger of protein synthesis. So protein synthesis means you synthesize, you make new proteins inside the muscle, but also in other tissues, of course. And that's the key parameter you want to increase after a bout of exercise, right? To increase not only the muscle mass, but to remodel the muscle, to recover, and to make it better for the next dose of exercise. So and we know that specifically leucine, so 1 out of 20 amino acids, the leucine triggers this whole enzymatic cascade to start making new building blocks, to synthesize new proteins. If you, for example, give to a rodent or a human only leucine, you will actually see a nice increase in muscle protein synthesis. Only leucine. Not the maximal, but you would see some increase. I actually did myself those experiments. If you, for example, would give arginine, maybe arginine slightly, but glutamine, other amino acids, just in a high dose, only dose, then you don't have this trigger of this cascade, and the muscle protein synthesis doesn't occur. Important caveat in this one is that you also need the other amino acids to have actually, as you just said, the building blocks of the whole peptide or the whole protein. So if you only would, for example, ingest leucine after or before workout for multiple weeks, you don't, of course, have all the building blocks that are required to actually form protein, right? So that's why I'm related to protein quality. An important parameter is how much leucine there is actually in this protein dose.
Okay, very interesting. And so for the other parameter that I was thinking about that is not related to leucine, absorption of protein by the body. So we can think about plants versus animal protein sources, for example. Can you talk about the main differences that we might find there and what that means if we want to consume one or the other?
Yeah, so there are some sources, mostly plants. So plants, interesting, they have some, they call it nutritious factors, such as tannins and other factors that actually decrease the digestion coming from the stomach to the actual intestines and the absorption of the amino acids. It's like a fighting mechanism of the plant, right? The amino acids, or at least the protein sources coming from animals, have that less and are typically digested faster, typically, right? Still, there are some differences. If you look at, for example, soy compared to casein is also a sort of milk protein. There you actually see a faster digestion of the amino acids in soy, which is plant-based, compared to casein, which is animal-based, right? So it depends on a couple of factors. Mostly is these nutritious factors in plants. Why is this important? The theory is that after a workout, you want to have access to the amino acids fast, right? So meaning that if you take something that is very slowly digested, I mean, after your stimulus related to the strength exercise or even endurance exercise, you want to have access to those amino acids quickly. But those kind of ideas about protein timing, the effective protein timing, have been kind of debunked over time, meaning that it probably is not that important as initially thought to consume your fast digesting whey protein right after exercise, right? It's probably not so important if your total protein intake is sufficient, right? So again, I wouldn't necessarily worry too much on how fast your proteins are digested. I'm looking mostly at plant-based sources, as long as you eat enough leucine and enough total amino acids or proteins during the day.
I want to talk about amounts and what is usually recommended for athletes. And if I'm not mistaken, the recommendations have gone up quite recently. But if we go back to the idea of that, slow versus fast, digesting protein, is casein. I remember reading that in Renaissance Periodization in their first ebook a while back, a few years ago now. Is casein still recommended as something you might take if you need more protein in your day? You might take that at the end of the day because it is slower digesting, and that might kind of quote unquote take you through the night, so to speak.
Yeah. I think that's still what is thought of is a good idea. These are mostly done by studies in Maastricht by Luc van Loon. Is actually very interesting. We have also posted many studies by him, Luc van Loon, and he wanted to know if your muscle protein synthesis is still going on if during the night if you take such a dose of protein such as casein. So that's what he measured, a lot of sleep studies, and they usually used casein because it's slowly digesting, meaning that indeed during the night you still have access to those amino acids, while with whey it would go up and then fall down quickly after 2 hours, and then you don't really know what you're looking at during the night. You see, so that's how it usually came into also the sports science world. Yeah, and related to overall quantity, and I think that's one of the most important things you just have to remember related to instead of, for example, timing, is what is recommended now is 1.6 gram of protein, of mostly high quality protein per kilogram body weight during the day for 24 hours. So it's not that much. Like, many people would get there relatively easy, even without taking massive protein shakes and eating 3 beef sticks per day. You have to think, if you weigh 75 kilo, you have to take 120 grams of protein during the day. It's relatively easy achievable for us or most non-elite athletes by just eating some protein meals throughout the day. Right. So yeah, you can figure it out for yourself how much you weigh, but 1.6 gram. How did they come to that figure? It's actually quite interesting. They took all the studies related to strength training, where they strength trained people, and also gave them a varied dose of proteins, meaning no or like very low amount of protein, like 0.6 or 0.7 grams per day, which is pretty low, to very high, to 3 grams per day, the bodybuilding style, right? And then they just checked the strength gains throughout that 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8-week period. And you saw that there was actually a linear increase from 0.8 to 1.4, 1.5. So there was actually an effect of the protein on top of the strength training. And then there was a plateau if you ate 2 or 3 grams per kilogram. So for most people, it really is not important to eat much more than, let's say, 2 grams per kilogram. It won't have much effect, right? Yeah.
Is there any importance on how you separate those 1.6 grams per kilo of body weight throughout the day? How many meals you have? How should that be? Is there a way to optimize it? To what extent it's worth optimizing this?
Yeah, so these are minute details, I would say. But if you really want to go into the weeds of those, I would say separate it throughout the day for 2 reasons. One is they did a study where they gave subjects 80 grams throughout, I don't know, I think it was a 12-hour window. And they did it 8 times 10, 4 times 20, and 2 times 40. So 3 different times, different doses, but always 80 grams. And they saw that the muscle protein synthetic response, so the MPS, throughout the day was actually the highest when they did 4 times 20. So this is because there's other studies showing that if you do a workout and then you take, it's similar study as what I just described. So if you do a workout and then you give 0, 5, 10, 20, or 40 grams of protein, so also a dose response, you see also a plateauing effect of this from 20 to 40. So it also, after workout, it doesn't really matter if you take high quality protein, such as whey, to really go higher than 25 grams of protein. It doesn't affect you. Why? Again, now we come back to the leucine. The leucine, it's like a trigger, right? So you get your 25 grams, it peaks into your blood, and the leucine is sensed by the enzymes inside your muscle. And there is, of course, an upper limit of this sensing. You cannot keep activating these processes to infinite. So that's why around 2.5 grams is like the upper limit. If you take 5 grams in your blood or getting in your blood, it won't even more potentiate this cascade of muscle protein synthesis. That's just basic biology in this case. So yeah, that's why if you take whatever, always doses of 20 grams throughout the day, you will be fine.
That reminds me a little bit of, not exactly in the same way, but I had Tim Podlegar on the podcast recently talking about glucose, and especially around glucose and nutrition for cyclists. And he talked about the different transporters from the intestine to the bloodstream, and how fructose has a different transporter than glucose. And so same thing, you can only go up to a certain point, only a certain amount of glucose can be metabolized per hour. And so beyond that, you need to kind of take the other transporters, because otherwise there's no additional effect by doing more, right?
Exactly. And the cool part is about this fructose that you have indeed another transporter, right? Because if you only take glucose, also the transporter GLUT4 in this case is saturated, and you don't get anything more. So it's very similar. Yes.
Very interesting. And I guess so the protein where you want essentially just your total amount distributed throughout the day, and the timing, like you were saying, is not that important. That is not the case when we talk about sugars. If we talk about glucose,
very correct.
If we want to optimize things, now we need to think about timing this. So can you maybe talk about, in broad strokes, how do we optimize our glucose intake throughout the day relative to a workout, a rest day, et cetera, et cetera?
Before I explain this, can I maybe explain a little bit what you just said, that the protein timing is not super important? Because I just did a study actually in the lab related to this, which exactly explained this, if you're fine with it.
Please do, please do.
Indeed, so what we did, it was in rodents, but it will be probably very similar in humans, although we don't know yet at this point, is that we wanted to know if you would do an exercise bout with rodents, or so a resistance exercise bout, and you give right after the exercise bout leucine or amino acids, or you give it 48 hours later. So that's a long time after. Would the effect on the enzymes in the muscle and the muscle protein synthetic response, would it be the same in both time periods, right? So and with what we saw is actually that there was a slight decrease 48 hours compared to acute, but it was still substantially there. So the potentiating effect of leucine after exercise was 48 hours still there. So because the effect of exercise is so potent that the muscle is still more open, let's say, to absorbing or to sensing leucine 48 hours after your bout. So this is almost the exact opposite of what you just said about glucose, right? Because glucose, it's a bit different. It gets indeed transported into the cell by GLUT4 vesicles, and GLUT4 vesicles, they usually, when you're just sitting and you don't eat, you're just fasted and you don't do any exercise, like in rest, they sit kind of inside the muscle fiber. It's not entirely correct, but they're not on like the surface, right? And once you start exercising, there's a certain part that goes to the sarcolemma, it's called, or the surface, and it can absorb the glucose out of the blood because, of course, it needs it to recover from the exercise. And that is time sensitive, meaning that those vesicles, after a while, so you do exercise, and for example, you don't eat any glucose, after a while they go back, and there's no glucose in the muscle, and the muscle is deprived. But so that's why you should take your glucose or your carbohydrates in close proximity to the termination of your workout, because then you have an extra boost to take up the glucose, in contrary to the leucine or the proteins.
Is there any significant advantage on, if we think about let's say a weightlifting session? So you might spend quite a bit of time in the gym. Is there any advantage to having maybe some protein and maybe some sugars during your session, assuming you can digest it well?
I don't really think so, honestly. Certainly not the proteins. Maybe if you have a long session with a lot of reps and a lot of suffering, so to say, you might actually be more beneficial to take up some carbohydrates, because it actually has been shown that glycogen, of course, the molecules that stick together, and or the glucose molecules that stick together and form glycogen, is actually decreasing during strength exercise, which makes sense because you do maximal muscle contractions, right? So it might make sense to actually keep fueling when you have a longer, not a 30-minute, but like 1.5 hours. You want to maybe take some glucose at the end. But amino acids, it's a bit of a controversial topic. I don't think it's going to do that much, for sure not. It might have some minute effects, but for most people, it doesn't really matter.
What do you see the biggest mistakes? Let me rephrase and use proper English. What are the biggest mistakes that CrossFitters usually do from your perspective when it comes to nutrition in general?
Nutrition in general, it's of course difficult to know. I mean, back in the day, there were even some elite athletes that were going low carb. That was always a bit of a strange idea for me. I never really understood it. then they started to see that that was probably not the best idea for performance. Because when I started CrossFit 8 years ago, it was very, very low carb paleo diet, and it was like coming from a research background. It's like, what the hell are these
did
guys
you ever
doing?
see did you ever see the zone stuff? Because I remember I remember using the zone diet when I had started out, and thinking back now is probably the most ridiculous way to organize macros I've ever heard of. But it was, you know, taunted by many of the top people at the time, and by CrossFit HQ as well. I remember.
It was taught, yeah.
Yeah, and it was taught even, yeah, and all I remember from that time period, all I remember was just being dizzy getting up from the couch. You know, I was not eating enough. This was not enough calories for what I was doing. But sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's very so. Yeah, I mean, that would be one of the most strange things I never really understood. This is where this point we try to hammer down with the WOD Science. I mean, and it's a very like important distinction that people really cannot make, meaning that the nutritional requirements and mostly the fuel of an elite/advanced athlete that is doing 4, 5, 6 sessions a week is completely different than someone who is sedentary 80% of the society nowadays and is not doing any exercise, right? If you are CrossFit and you want to give some nutritional advice to completely sedentary people, I would say, okay, limit your carbohydrate intake. It doesn't really matter, and it's only going to make you feel pretty bad and maybe insulin insensitive and so on, right? If you're sedentary. But of course, a CrossFitter is in any case already doing at least, let's say, 2 to 3 sessions per week. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to go in a low carbohydrate diet with also low in total energy intake, right? Because that's also probably sometimes close to it. Because the super fuel, like the fuel you actually need during the high intensity work, is the carbohydrates. So, and that's very basic physiology that is unrefutable. So, and certainly in people who are not adapted to keto, which are mostly everyone. So, yeah, that would be one of the things. Like if you are active and you're doing a lot of CrossFit or other sports, I mean, carbohydrates are not the enemy because they are your fuel. And if you don't need the fuel, you probably don't need to add the fuel all the time. I agree. But if you need the fuel, there's no scientific reason to not eating any carbohydrates.
Is there?
And then, yes, so go ahead.
No, you continue. I'll keep mine for after.
Yeah, so related to that, I mean, we talked about this also quite a bit, and that was referring to the more sensitive topics is, for example, there's a drink, it's called NOCCO, no carbohydrates company, NOCCO. And it's interesting drink, like it contains BCAAs, so the predominantly leucine, which is important. So you have valine, isoleucine, and leucine, which are the BCAAs, the 3 branch chain amino acids, containing pretty high dose, caffeine, and no carbohydrates, and some flavor, of course. And many people drank that after a workout as a recovery thing. I was like, no, because you're going to trigger the muscle protein synthesis with the leucine, fine, which you will have some effect of. You don't have all the building blocks, the other amino acids, because they're not in. You have caffeine. Why would you need caffeine after a workout? You probably want to need it before. And you don't have the glucose, which you actually need. We just talked about it.
Yeah.
So it was like, no, as a pre-workout shake could actually work. NOCCO. But afterwards, it doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it tastes well and it's fine. But that was funny because also in the CrossFit world, it was really it's still probably a very popular drink and doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, but like you said, the caffeine after, as if in general, and I'll caricature, but I'm not doing that in a mean way. As if CrossFitters aren't hyped enough after training, you need to add a bit of a dose of caffeine to even push that recovery out the window even a little bit farther, right? Because there's something to be said for proper fueling after training, and also getting your nervous system back to baseline so that you can start recovering and starting that process that's going to, get you to a better place. And always staying in this hyped environment internally and externally and internally is not conducive to proper recovery, building more muscle, and then actually adapting from the training, because the adaptations happen outside of training, not during, right?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Tour de France is won in bed, right? That's what they say, and it's very correct. I mean,
yeah, how much can you recover and be ready for the next one?
Yeah.
Is there in your mind a place for, if we talk about periodizing carbs, in the sense, what I mean by that is periods of the year where you might drastically drop your intake of sugars in general to resensitize the body a little bit, and so that when you go back to a higher volume of training, the body might respond better to that stimuli. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it sounds logical, but I'm not sure there's actually, that claim is actually scientifically backed. Meaning, for example, I did some studies back in the day with students where we did an oral glucose tolerance test, where we get, what is that? We just give them a high amount of glucose, like 120 grams or so in one go drinking, and then see the glucose and the insulin response as well. And you see that in active people, in any case, like all the active students, like the sportive guys, man, the glucose was just shunted into the muscle and into the like other systems as well, mostly in the muscle, like very fast. And then you saw other people that were in any case less active. We had some questionnaire where the glucose remained much higher and the insulin or the insulin response was less high. How it could, I mean, if you're, for example, more of an endurance athlete, right, where you have some more periods in time. I'm thinking about cyclists, for example, in October, November, even maybe beginning of December, where they have much less training. It might make sense to just decrease the amount of carbohydrates you just eat, right? But it's again more of a fueling and what you need for your body compared to, are we going to sensitize the muscle more or less? I mean, these guys, active people, in any case, have sufficiently high sensitivity to carbohydrates to take it up. So I don't see any effect of long-term, let's say, carbohydrate periodization. Interesting to maybe to that point, there have been some studies which investigated the sleep low strategy. I don't know if you heard about that. It's called sleep low. So meaning that you do a high intensity exercise or high intensity interval session at 5 to 6 p.m. So in the evening, you don't eat during the night, only protein or even nothing. You go to bed with a very low glycogen, low glycogen in liver and also muscle. And then the next day you wake up, you don't eat again, at least no carbohydrates, and you do a long session, a low intensity long session, 1 hour, 2 hours. And this you repeat 3 times a week, approximately. This is what they actually studied, which is, of course, carbohydrate cycling, because after your low intensity session in the morning, you can eat as much carbohydrates as you want, right? You really want to refuel as much as you want. And this has been shown to have some beneficial effects on performance related to when you do the same training, but always fueled with carbohydrates.
Yeah, which would make sense from a physiological standpoint on simply what substrate you're more likely to be utilizing. If you have less, we know that if you have less glycogen available, you're more likely to use fats. And you talked about the long session in the morning. One of the primary goals of this kind of session is going to be, type 1 fibers, mitochondrial density, capillary density, fat oxidation. And so with that lowered, even more, more lower than usual glycogen content, going into the session, you're actually at a quote unquote advantage. And from what I understand, that's probably one of the best ways that people, if they don't have a lot of time to do low intensity work, that might be a good way to optimize it, as in kind of put you in the right internal state to benefit from that type of work. Recently talking to some people in the cycling world, they also said that, and that goes exactly to your point, fat oxidation goes up as the ride gets longer, even if you stay at a low intensity, which would make sense because even at a low intensity, you do utilize glycogen. So your stores get depleted slowly, but they do. And so the more depleted they become, the more fats you're gonna turn up oxidizing. So that makes total sense from that standpoint on a one day to the next day. Do you think it would make sense in any context for somebody, training and competing in CrossFit to use those kind of nutritional approaches around their training?
Great question. It has never been studied. So I don't know any coach who's ever been doing it, but it makes sense to me. Certainly in the off season, I would say, let's say the open starts in February. Want to be good there during the like Christmas period, December to January. Doing that approach would be I think a very interesting way of getting your aerobic base up, because that is something also not very controversial, but I know a lot of CrossFitters who never do any type 2 training, right? But they're very good. Who am I to say that that's not a good way to do it, right? They're very good athletes. But there are some elite athletes that actually do 3-4 sessions per week at very low intensity. So yeah, I mean, it's better than me. It's not exact science. But for sure, if you're like a bubble athlete, right? Like you don't really know what's best for you. This is something I would try out for sure.
I think it can't be understated in my opinion. I meet you there. The low intensity for CrossFitters, I think it's overlooked. For whatever reason it is, it's at least from what I've seen in the athletes that I've worked with, it's widely overlooked, and even a small dose can have a very positive effect on many training. And what's been related to me from people that have included, even if it's 1 or 1.5 hours per week of low intensity work. So, that's 2 times 45 minutes. Anybody can do that and watch a couple Netflix episodes in the meantime, and, better recovery between sessions, more tolerance for high intensity work, better sleep, getting to the end of the week and not being completely smashed by the volume, but actually tolerating it better, which again makes complete sense if you look at what's done in endurance sports. You do the low intensity work to help you tolerate more high intensity training. And since CrossFit is in essence high intensity, exercise, theoretically at least, if you have a better base, you can tolerate more, you could do more. And as we know, the more you do of your sport, the more likely you are to perform well in your sport. And so that makes total sense. So maybe let's talk about the physiology of CrossFit a little bit now, since it's a topic that you cover in quite a bit of depth and breadth on your page. What are the biggest myths that still stand, in your opinion, in the CrossFit world regarding the exercise physiology in general, but as it relates specifically to CrossFit?
That's a tough question always, right? The myths.
If there was an idea that is still floating out there that you would like to see never be mentioned again, what would it be?
It's difficult to say, honestly. This one, it got me a bit off guard on the CrossFit per se, because it's so difficult to tell people they're really doing something wrong, certainly when they're good athletes, right? Because CrossFit is so varied that I mean, I know some athletes that, for example, never really periodize. Like they literally do constantly varied training at high intensity all the time, and they're elite, one of the best in the world. So they don't do a back squats cycle. They just back squat now and then, the 5 times 2, and then they do 5 times 10. And they are crazy beasts, right? So, and then you have others, they are much more, like how I would train, like really do it everything in periods and try to build up the load and so on. And they are also good. So that's the beauty, but also the interesting part about CrossFit is really like you have such a varied effect on your body, like from endurance more to pure raw strength 1 RM, that the variety of training and also the sets and the reps is something you see constantly, and it's difficult to have any comment on it because it seems to be working.
That makes sense. And I have a hypothesis for this, and I'll come back to my follow-up afterwards, but do you think it's related to the in one way or another? And again, not absolutely not to degrade anybody's training or
Yeah, yeah.
achievements. CrossFit is a fairly young sport still, and
Yeah.
there might not yet be the full genetic potential of humanity is a big word, but
Of course.
we might not have seen all that can be done in CrossFit
Yeah.
yet. And
Yeah.
we know that as a sport evolves and gets older, we do kind of see trends in the way that people train and how people actually get to the top of the sports.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that leeway is linked in some way to simply the young nature of CrossFit?
Yeah, it's a good hypothesis. I mean, and I'm also, it could be, I agree, although nowadays, I mean, you really are seeing some more, not really plateauing, but at least leveling off of the, for example, the pure strength events. I mean, that's where you can see the plateauing, right? You know,
Right.
in the Metcon, it's impossible. Like an open workout, it's difficult to actually see. But you see, for example, there was now the other CrossFit Total where they did a clean overhead squat and a bench press, and there you see the upper males did 400 pounds clean. So for a CrossFitter elite athlete, that's, yeah, I don't think, even with different training periods and different training methodologies and also another genetic pool, whatever, in 10 years, this is going to increase substantially anymore. It has been, for sure. Like, look at the videos from 2012. But now we're actually getting to, the later stages, not the later, but at least later stages of CrossFit, where you will see the top of human performance in that sport getting plateauing, like a 400 meters or a Usain Bolt, or you know what I mean. We will get there. It's a road to go, but we are on the plateauing phase. That's what I think. Yes.
No, it's an interesting observation. Going back to my prior question on myths that still stand in CrossFit, if we maybe get away from how people train, but concepts that people talk about from a physiological standpoint, what things do people still say in CrossFit about the underlying physiology of what they're doing that you'd like to see maybe just updated? Because I mean, in my opinion, nobody's going to die because we say something the wrong way or we use the wrong word. Of
course.
But it does make sense over time to try and update our vocabulary and our concepts and our models based on what we know. So what outdated models, let's call them, do you still see floating around in CrossFit that you'd like to see updated?
Go heavy or go hard or go home. That's what they always say, right? And maybe go hard, that's, you can debate about that, but go heavy or go home, that doesn't make much sense. Meaning, there have been some good studies, from established researchers and research groups, showing that you can achieve a similar hypertrophy, muscle hypertrophy and strength with light loads compared to heavy loads. And this is more and more incorporated, and many people take quite some offense on it, why I don't understand. But if you go to failure or almost like near failure with light loads, you will achieve very similar hypertrophy than doing it with heavier loads, for example, 80%. There is a threshold of 20 to 25% of your 1RM. Below that, you won't get any hypertrophy, or at least less than heavy weights. But if you do 40%, 50%, which is very light, think about it, at least from a scientific point of view, you can perfectly gain muscle mass, strength, and so on. And this is also maybe interesting. We have one important article, I think, that really boosted the page in the beginning, is where we talk about how CrossFitters get so muscular. Like, why do they get so much mass, right? First thing is, they all take steroids, maybe, but let's put it aside. Why, on a physiological basis, do they? Because if you see, I mean, most are pretty muscular, hypertrophic, while they actually do a lot of aerobic stuff, right? A lot. Also strength, but a lot. So one of our more hypothetical and not very scientific ways of thinking was that during a Metcon, so not during pure strength, but during a Metcon, for example, Fran, where you do 21 thrusters, right? And at the end, even when it's with a light weight, you will be near failure with light weights. Secondly, when you do compound exercises such as thrusters, which CrossFitters do all the time, there is some kind of blood flow restriction in some parts of the body, some elements of the body. For example, with thrusters, most of the work and most of the blood is shunted towards the lower body, while also the upper body is working, right? So we think it's a more of a hypothetical idea, and it should actually be researched in more detail if someone is interested in that, to see, for example, with Niels, for example, you know probably more about than me, is how does the muscle oxygenation look like in the triceps, in the biceps during like a heavy set or a long set of thrusters? It's probably going to be very low, and this could be a hypertrophic stimulus even during very aerobic events. And that's kind of interesting and not really looked at in research, so we don't really know. But that's one of the hypotheses why people who do whatever 8 or 10 metcons a week are actually getting pretty muscular.
That's really interesting hypothesis. It makes sense at face value, right? Because we know that deoxygenation is going to have a positive response from metabolic standpoint. I can tell you from the testing that I've done that you'll see in well-trained people, even on a bike, essentially, for those who are familiar with the concept of critical power or critical speed for runners, when you're in the severe intensity domain, when you pass that fatigue threshold, you'll see deoxygenation of non-involved muscles. So you'll see a shoulder going down, near zero. You'll see a forearm for a runner go down near zero as well. So that would be an interesting thing to test, like you said, to see if the shunting of blood during a given exercise might elicit a stronger hypertrophic response of non-involved muscles. But you got to think about, obviously, you jump from one to the other, so you might deprive your you're still using your shoulders in a thruster, but let's say you're just doing air squats and pull-ups, for example. You might still have a deficiency in oxygen in your shoulders during your air squats if you're doing it long enough and hard enough. But then you're jumping up on the bar and you have that contractile element, which seems to be fundamental if we want to see muscle growth, right? We don't see muscle growth in the absence of contraction. No, that's a very interesting idea. How would you go if you were in charge? So you're in charge, Gommaar. How would you test that hypothesis? What would you set up for the research project, or how would
very simply a similar setup as you just said? You would do, for example, one group of people who do pull-ups. To, let's say, do pull-ups, not to exhaustion, just to, let's say, if you have someone who can do 10 pull-ups, let them do 6 pull-ups, right? So you have some contractions, and then you let another group or a similar person after a washout period, you let them do before that 100 air squats, and then again only 6 pull-ups, and see if in the second group the hypertrophy would be higher. You see, because you wouldn't think that there would be a lot of hypertrophy in the biceps and in the brachioradialis with the first, like the set of pull-ups without any real muscle fatigue, right? Because you stop quite a bit in front of your fatigue or your exhaustion. But with the second one, it will be hard to do the 6 pull-ups. I'm sure I actually did similar workout this week. Hard to do even 6 pull-ups. And then you probably would actually, my hypothesis would definitely be that you will see more hypertrophy in the second example. I don't know.
So I need to try and superset my Wingate sprints and bicep curls now.
Exactly. But that's kind of what you're always doing in CrossFit all the time.
It's true.
Always
it's
like
true.
Just all the time you're doing this, and it's definitely has an effect on the hypertrophic stimulus of the muscle.
That's super interesting. I'm really glad you brought that up. As a closing question, Gommaar, it was a great pleasure to have you on. What data would you like to see coming out of CrossFit? What information would you like to see from different workouts, different athletes? What still intrigues you on the underlying physiology of CrossFit?
So yeah, let's say two separate arms. One would be more information on elite athletes in a more objective way. So we know just by looking at the CrossFit Games that these people are at the top of human capacity related to endurance, strength, like the intersection. I mean, you can be against CrossFit, you can be like, but if you're just looking at it from a objective point of view, these people, if you have some intersection of endurance and strength, they will be one of the best athletes in the world for sure, right? They can run, they can lift. So, but we don't know how this relates on an objective base to elite athletes in one of the two, like aspects. Meaning, how does an elite athlete objectively compare to an elite cyclist? Like, how far off is that person?
Yeah.
Also, same with strength, although it's a bit more difficult, of course. But how far off is this person in for example, a leg extension test or a leg extension with like where the degrees are like always going up in the same way. So really standardized tests that we can do in the lab with the biodex and so on, right? So that would be very interesting to compare, like elite athletes, like games athletes. There's no data about this out. Why do I say this? Because we're doing such a study ourselves. And this, like, we're trying to recruit people, sub-elite, elite athletes, and doing very rigorous, good tests. I think it's a quite an interesting way of looking at it. And secondly, just a general improvement of the methodology on how studies are conducted in CrossFit. Now, it is very observational, like, what is the correlation between 1 RM strength and Fran? Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be high, right? Like these kind of studies you see all the time popping up. I'm always like, yes, there's a new CrossFit study. Always like, okay, what is the question? More questions about specific effects. For example, does your muscle fiber typology or muscle fiber type have an effect on how you would split up sets in a Metcon? I would assume, but I don't know, there's no studies about it, that explosive athletes who are very high 1 RM should break up earlier because of NIRS, because of deoxygenation, than more endurance athletes.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
You probably know, and probably coaches know this actually. But from a scientific point of view, the use of NIRS, the use of muscle biopsies, more of lactate measurements and so on are almost never used. So this, I would just see a general increase in scientific methodology. And because it's a new sport, but a very like interesting sport from a physiological point of view, I don't understand why more research groups are going into that direction and keep sticking with one-legged leg extensions and something that no one does.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. And I was just talking earlier with a guy called Andrew Usher. He does a lot of NIRS testing with boxers in Scotland.
Okay.
And he actually uses NIRS during sparring sessions to give feedback to the athletes on where are they energetically, can they keep going, should they back off? So what you were saying here, and maybe a tool to be investigated in a matter of optimizing pacing, like you were just saying, to try and gain some insights on those things. That's really interesting. One last question, since you brought it up. You're talking about the study you're conducting right now. What endurance metrics are you quantifying with the CrossFit athletes to compare them to the pure endurance folks?
Yeah, simply an exercise test to exhaustion on the bike with so very basic, because that's what also is mostly described in research, right? So it's kind of a-specific related to CrossFit, I know, meaning that you do a ramp test with oxygen measurements and lactate measurements. So that's what we now do related to endurance.
That's very, very interesting. Well, I look forward to following your page and finding out about those results in coming months. And if I can help in any way, give me a shout. But man, that was a lot of fun. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. So as a reminder, at WOD_Science, that's your Instagram page. And people can also download your ebook from Amazon. The link is in the description. Gommaar, if you have anything to add, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, hopefully some fellow scientists that are interested in CrossFit high intensity training are following and could convince their boss to do some high quality research on CrossFit, because it's an emerging sport from a physiological point, very interesting. And for the rest, yeah, thank you for bringing me here. Happy to keep sharing new data that is coming out, strength, endurance, fitness. And if you have something to ask or a certain topic you want to see brought up, just DM us on Instagram and we'll be happy to share it.
Fantastic. Thanks again, man.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, please take a few moments to leave a written review and a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. If you want to watch this episode again, you can find the full video recording on my YouTube channel. You'll also find hundreds of hours of free content, all my podcasts, my thoughts of the day, structured presentations, and more. So don't wait, go subscribe, and I'll see you in the next episode. Take care.